My name is Michael Mansfield. I'm the one most privileged to really organize this really fantastic place that is Maine Media, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you all today for what promises to be a wonderful conversation with Cig and Jeanette. Of course, um, talking about her most recent achievement in Emerald Drifters. This is really exciting. This is our final lecture for the spring season. Um, and we'll give you an update on what all's happening at Maine Media this summer here shortly. But I want to say programs like this are really made possible by the great generosity of our Maine Media community. So I'm really grateful for everything that you do to help support the lectures and the programs and scholarships and fellowships and the magic of this place. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, both for attending, but also for supporting us. It's really fantastic. It gives us so much encouragement and really lights this place up. We're about to start the summer season. We open the campus. Start welcoming students. We have students on campus now, but really the workshop season starts in just a couple weeks' time in mid-June. And boy, the human creativity, the human energy on this campus really just really ignites some things here. And I hope you'll all have a chance to come visit us this summer, take part in a workshop, get involved, come to the lectures, the events, the exhibitions. It's going to be something sight to behold. I hope to see you here. We have a lot happening. I want to mention this summer we are opening the Hamilton Darkrooms. This is a great project here on campus, completely renovated and designed, state-of-the-art gelatin silver darkrooms, which I know Cig had a little bit of experience with here on campus in the old space. This one is entirely new. It is, of course, named for Brenton Hamilton, who's had a long history with Maine Media and was really influential and impactful with so many of our students and still teaches here often. And so the Hamilton Darkrooms will open this summer with a residency with the Park Harrisons, who will also be included in an exhibition in the Haas Gallery, which will be opening at the outset of the season. So when you're on campus, we'll have a chance to see some really remarkable images and pictures that are made in that process. So, I would really, the invitation is open, so I hope you will come. We will also be following that exhibition with a great celebration of Paul Caponegro in an exhibition, also in the Haas Gallery in the late summer, early fall. And of course, Paul was just a remarkable giant in the field, certainly in printing, and is just another highlight in our opportunity to celebrate the great impact, the beauty of these images and photographs that can be produced in that space. So one of the most generous and fantastic printmakers in the history of the medium. So that'll be a wonderful thing at the end of the summer. I know that Cig does not really need an introduction. I'm going to attempt a rather modest one anyway. I've known Cig for a number of years. I had the great privilege of working on an exhibition with her at the Algonquin Museum of American Art. It was a really moving experience for me to dive into a body of images that I thought I knew. But in that process, I rediscovered so many things about her practice, about color, about images, and about writing, and the great interdependency between words and images that is so important to her work. She is, of course, her photographs and her books are in permanent collections and museums and private institutions around the world, including the Library of Congress and the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and Philadelphia, Yale University Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, Texas, where I went to school, the Farnsworth Art Museum, the International Museum of Photography and Film at the George Eastman House, and J.P. Morgan Chase Art Collection. She's represented by Robert Mann Gallery in New York, Peter Fetterman Gallery in Los Angeles, Jackson Fine Art in Atlanta, Robert Klein in Boston, and of course, Dowling Walsh here in Maine. our very own Rockland. She's also exhibited worldwide, of course, at Paris Photo and APAD, where we just got a preview of some images very recently. She's, of course, published 5 books. You Look at Me Like an Emergency, which was a remarkable beginning. Gardening at Night in 2015, You an Orchestra, You a Bomb in 2017. It was a really great trilogy of books there. Of course, Reveal in 2020, Blue Violet in 2021, and of course, the book we're talking about now, Emerald Drifters, published by Fade and Monticelli in 2025. So, Cig, thank you for coming with us today. I also want to introduce Jeanette Abbink, who, of course, is the principal at Rational Beauty. It's a design studio known for crafting visually striking and thoughtfully editorialized design. She's recognized by multiple institutions and collected at permanent libraries like MoMA, the Met, Court Hall, MFA Boston, New York Public Library, and the Royal Library, as well as many others. She's the designer of both Blue Violet and Emerald Drifters with Cig Harvey, so they'll have a lot to talk about. She's an adjunct professor at UT Austin, teaching typography and editorial design. And of course, UT Austin is the home of the Ransom Center and the Gersheim Collection, where the very first photograph created, or remaining the surviving photograph in 1826, 1827, is in the collection. Cig, Jeanette, we have a lot to talk about. Have at it.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael, for that wonderful introduction. Thanks for having Jeanette and I here. We're so grateful to Main Media, to Michael, to Beth, to Rachel for hosting us. I know Jeanette and I spend hours talking about our love of books and geeking out about books and all things books and consideration of book form. And so we're really excited to be here, aren't we, Jeanette? We're wide open. We'll share everything. We'll talk about how we work together, which I think has been one of the most it has been one of the highlights of my career, working together with Jeanette. She takes a box of prints and some text and she makes it a book. And the difference is extraordinary. And I sort of want to begin with that, this idea that I teach bookbinding and have done for 25 years. And, consider every element of the book form. And yet, when it comes to book design, I know nothing. It's its own thing. So without Jeanette, Blue Violet or Emerald Drifters would be anything like the books that they are. So I want to really take a moment to sort of deeply send my gratitude and love to Jeanette. So we're going to share, I'm going to go first and talk a little bit about the overall sort of before it even becomes a book. That's going to be a shorter part. And then I'll switch it over to Jeanette, and she's going to take over and show some things that sort of went into behind the scenes of Emerald Drifters and Blue Violet. But of course, please jump in. Like, we're here to share everything. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll sort of glance at them. So will Jeanette, so will Michael. We'll try and get it covered just in the general conversation. If not, we do have a set time at the end to answer specific questions, but ask whatever you want. There's no question that's not worthy, and we're open to hearing it all. All right, first of all, I'm going to go and share my screen, and I'm going to remember to press play, right, Jeanette?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so can everyone share my screen? Thumbs up. Everyone see it, I mean? Great. Jeanette, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit. Jeanette's done this gorgeous slide. We're talking about project planning, concept development, through to image selection and editing, design and layout, prototyping, pre-press, proofing, final checks, printing and delivery, and then we'll talk a little bit about the year-long marketing strategy that goes with books towards the end. But this is the basic layout of today's presentation and talk. We'll probably jump around a little bit, but that's just so you know, we do have a plan. Initially, I want to talk about this idea of where my books came from and what they grew out of. And they grew out of this visual source book that methodology of working that I learned at Main Media in the late 90s, early aughts, where I would journal and cut out my contact sheets This one is from 2003, not 23. That's the day. And I would put together all my ideas, anything half-heard conversation on the bus or the T or the tube. I would any music I was listening to, any writing I was doing, journaling, painting, shows I'd seen this was at the Whitney, and just putting them all in one area, one source book. And when I look back at these, particularly the earlier source books, journals, if you will, they really bear a resemblance to the books that I'm making now, just in terms of this idea of layout, of text and image colliding, but also that a book doesn't have to be this sort of greatest hits. I think initially when we come to thinking about how we want our work to live in book form, it becomes, we think about sort of all of our work. It becomes about our career as a photographer and greatest hits. Whereas really, if you think about music albums, the strongest albums are often around one idea, one breakup, or one love, or one event, as opposed to, you know, the greatest hits albums where things jump around. So for me, that this idea that the book is an experimentation and a collision of all of these things around one time period of your life, all the things you're listening to, eating, inspired by, you know, you catch them all in a bucket, the bucket of the visual source book, and then put them out into the world as a published book. For me, those are the parameters that guide how I decide what is in and out of a book. Oh, that's not letting me. All right. Oh, all right. I've got to, okay.
Click your arrow key.
Yeah, I got it. So then, you know, taking those source books and building them into this idea of how else can we impart information, not just photographs and not just text, but all of my books have this level of sometimes instructionals, sometimes mind maps, sometimes playlist, sometimes text messages. So using whatever I can pull with whatever is going on around me into this form. So the book becomes this container. It becomes this sort of nebulous container where you can pour in all of your ideas. And that part is why I love books. Books are democratic. They can live. An ISBN number is forever. They have the potential to live all over the world, much, much freer than an exhibition possibly could be. So I work in these visual source books and then add in these mind maps into the source books. And these mind maps have been in a number of my trade books throughout the last 20 years. And this is me really showing my process where I'm writing down all of my ideas. I'm brainstorming nouns and verbs and subject matter and metaphor and symbol and light and color and you know, what does it feel like? Should it be a film? Should it be a mind map? Should it be a photograph? Should it be a erasure poem? So pulling all these ideas in together, because then it makes this book, it makes it this experiment in many ways. And that's what led to, I had my first book published in 2011, and that took almost 10 years. You look at me like an emergency, 10 years of work, and to get that published. Probably it took around 2 or 3 years of actually hitting the pavements and trying to find a publisher for that. And we will talk about that process as we move towards the end of the presentation. If people have questions around that, I'm happy to answer anything. And that landed my first 3 books, You Look at Me Like an Emergency, Gardening, and Orchestra, were all published by a Dutch publisher called Schilt, publishing out of Amsterdam. Incredible publishing house. I really loved those books. I worked with the same designer all the way through, Deb Wood, who was wonderful. And she really brought together the handwriting, the journals, and put them together. We wrote on the photographs. A book is not an exhibition. It's not a box of prints. So what could it be? And how can we present it in a way that feels true to the work? I've told this story a few times, but when I was first laying out You Look at Me Like an Emergency, I didn't have a designer. I wasn't working with an incredible Deb or an amazing Jeanette. was just using Blurb. And this is nothing about Blurb at all in Blurb's defense, but my books came through and they were like $150 each Blurb book because I wanted the best paper. I'm sure you've all been through that experience of trying to, of putting together a Blurb book. And it just came through and it was a thud. And it was because I was using Helvetica. It was because I didn't know about sort of book design. And so really, you know, working with a designer took my books to the next level without a doubt. So Jeanette and I have worked on the last two books together, and hopefully there'll be a third and a fourth. Blue Violet in 2021, and Emerald, which was just released a couple of months ago, late March of this year. All right, we're going backwards, Jeanette. This is a, all right, here we go. There we go. All right, so how do I know when the book is there? When is it ready? So what I typically tend to do is the first year and a half of a project, or 2 years, something like that, I pour all of my pictures into one folder. That folder lives on my desktop and I just keep making photographs. And I'm in that stage right now for my next book. So every week I go out, I make pictures, or every day I make a picture or I write something and I pour it into one folder and I don't really look at it. Just keep making. While I'm doing promotions for Emerald, I'm actually working on the next book, but I'm not analyzing the next book. I'm just making pictures. And then what happens at the end of that year and a half, I'll start looking at it and be like, well, why am I drawn to that wisteria? Or why am I drawn to this river or that group of people? And I would challenge you to think about your own work with that. Like, why are you drawn to the things, the subject matter that you're drawn to? So then I take that moment of a year and a half's worth of work and I put it up on the wall, or I look at it in Bridge and I analyze, well, how are the pictures connected? What are the links? What are the threads that link all of this work together? Sometimes it's more apparent than others. Sometimes it's very vague and it feels like the pictures aren't linked, and maybe they aren't all connected, but typically in my gut, I truly believe they always are, even if at first it doesn't seem apparent. So when, you know, this wisteria image was one of the very first images I made for Emerald. And I think many times that actually this picture should have been in Blue Violet, which was much more flower-based, where Blue Violet, I took the world of flowers as a metaphor. The work is not about flowers, it's about living and dying, but I use the flowers as metaphor to talk about what it is to be human, what it is to have sensation, what it is to feel, which is essentially what all of my work is about. So oftentimes the parameters around the book are almost, you know, one leads into another, leads into another, leads into another. So there's always one picture that should have been in the book before, and then, or the book after. And I say that because it's not this sort of hard and fast rule, you know, because I work from this place initially of intuition, the edges are sort of fluid. I do that because if I set out, me personally, to make a book about this, then I think I would be missing out on all the beautiful creativity that happens when you're in the flow. When we're working from a place of gut and intuition, there is no anxiety. It's this place where it's purely you, and only you can make that work. And that's what makes your visual voice. And it's already inside of each and every one of us. You just have to make enough work for it to come out. So I started, when I was making the starting of Emerald Drifters, I was just paying attention. I was making work. This apple tree, Last Light, made in Thomaston, Maine, at an orchard I photograph at all the time, was one of another early images for Emerald, made in late 2021. Typically, it takes me around 4 years. That's not, I set that out, but 4 years a book, with the exception of Orchestra, which was very much around one specific thing of an car accident I was in. And I made work for 2 years in a very pointed way about that traumatic event. This is another very early one from Emerald, where I'm making work at night, really for the first time. And the camera became this youthful eye. I have to wear glasses now. My eyesight is changing. And photographing at night with the camera, where the camera could see so much more than my eyes, that to me was such a source of inspiration. And I photographed every single night. And I was photographing like a 13-year-old again. Like, I'd never been more in love with photography, wanting to see what it looked like through the camera. the Gold Road, again, I think it's a 2022. So what am I doing here? I'm making photographs, I'm putting them into the bucket in my desktop, and now I'm starting to analyze them. And what am I seeing? I'm seeing color. I'm really seeing like that I'm drawn to, this natural world where it almost feels like, how can it possibly be real? How can this be a road of pollen? People ask me, well, did you make this? Did you construct this photograph? No, I didn't. I always start with this is maple pollen falling down all at this one moment because of atmospheric conditions on the road. Lasted about 5 minutes and then it was gone. So, what am I noticing here? I'm interested in rare things in nature. I'm interested in atmosphere. I'm interested in color. I'm interested in when something takes my breath away. Is that a content of a book? Or I know it is, but how can I shape it? And at the same time, I'm writing every day. And I feel like when I start looking back at my writing, when I start doing the date night with my writing and pictures, that I am actually writing more about color. So suddenly the form of the book is taking place where I realize now the thread that's going to carry this book, so it's not going to be a greatest hits, it is going to have a sense of direction, is my love of color. And that makes sense to me just conceptually. It makes sense to me emotionally that I've spent my life in love with color, but I've never made a book specifically about color. So then I start really tailoring the writing to be about color. And that ends up being this sort of whole mind-blowing experience for me where I've read in the last in the making of Emerald, I read probably 30 or 40 books on color, theory books, science books, biology, physics. I read everything around it because as an artist, I feel like that's our job, is to sort of do the research, find out where it comes from, find out who our peers are, the scientific research behind the work that we make. And I actually love that part of it. So now the book is starting to take shape. I'm still photographing intuitively. Sometimes I'm constructing, like with the cakes. So Scout suddenly starts making these incredible cakes in 2022. She's 12 at that point. And suddenly she's like, this was one of the first ones she made. This was a 7-layer chocolate cake that was sort of moved this way and that. And when she made it, I carried it over to the edge of our stairwell by my studio and photographed it on the edge of the precipice. And I took this picture just before she fell. And so Scout and I started this collaboration where she would make the cakes and she would make them for me. And I would photograph them. And so I'm paying attention. I'm like seeing, well, how does this picture work with the apple trees? Does it? Could it possibly? And just sort of really putting this sort of time period as the parameter of the book. And then the cakes start leading into these sort of more research. I'm looking at obviously Dutch still life painting. And then I start constructing these photographs and it becomes about this memento mori because I realize how the cakes become this, they are linked to the Gold Road, to the apple tree, because they're about time, right? We map our lives in cake, celebrations, commiserations, funerals, weddings, birthdays. And so I start thinking about, memento mori and how in painting, cakes have been used and still life has been used as the secret messages. Then I start mind mapping. Again, this goes into the book. And then it seems like there's a book within a book here. So cake became this wonderful collaboration I did with Two Ponds Press, which is a fine press artist book. So there are original prints inside. A book is often seen as a misnomer because it's really a presentation. It's a portfolio because with its 12 original prints, beautifully designed, everything's handmade. It's very different from a trade book. So I would ask you, what should your book be? Should it be a zine? Should it be a one-of-a-kind book made by yourself, soup to nuts? I've done many of those. Should it be a trade book? Should you hit the pavements trying to get it made? Should it be a fine art press book? There's so many different type of books, and not one is greater than the other. Trade books have a greater reach, but a one-of-a-kind book given to someone because you love them is just an extraordinary way to live. So it's a yes for everything. So I'm now working with more intention for the pictures for Emerald Drifters. These are made last year. Scouts, this is my Mother's Day cake that then I took down to the stream. And now I'm starting to see how images could perhaps work together. And so I'm thinking in book form. For me, a book is the sort of the home of photographs and text. It brings it all together. I work, as you are hearing, that I work sort of independently, writing every day, photographing every day, and never the two shall meet until the time comes to make the book. And then I start falling in here how do I start an initial layout? So here it is, just in Bridge. There's that wonderful option in Bridge where it says output to PDF, which is what I'll do. So this is a start of a layout. This is how I did learn InDesign for a minute, and then I just realized it's not what I need it for. So I just work from Bridge. I'm not a Lightroom person. I'm old school. And this is me laying out the book in Bridge, and then I'll export it to a PDF and I'll flip through it. And it doesn't show images side by side, but that's enough for me to then pass on to Jeanette. So what we're seeing here, and we'll talk more about that sort of sequencing, the brain likes surprise. I didn't want all the text to be at the beginning or the end. I didn't want all the red pictures to be in one area, even though you definitely see there's this sequence going on through in color here. You don't want 3 images and then text, 3 images and then text, 3 images and then text. You want to break that up so it doesn't, the reader doesn't know what's coming next. I sort of love that part, that how can we surprise the reader when you turn the page? A book is a world into its glorious self. So how can we make someone gasp if they turn a page? That to me would be heavenly. And so when I have this part, then I'm ready to start sharing it. And so with Emerald, I worked very closely with Madeleine Morlaix, who teaches book design. Is her superpower. She's teaching a class at Main Media in September. Sign up if you want to go. She's wonderful. And she is a really good editor. So she would help me see how images and text would work together, see how the flow, correlation between images, how a photograph would refer back to, it'd be a callback. And so it's really good, I think, essential to have that second pair of eyes initially. And we worked really all the way through. I worked with her more than any of my other books, getting that second opinion. And she was really invaluable. And then at that point, when it's time to then sort of take it to Jeanette. So this is one of the first layouts of Emerald. And I realized there were some photographs missing. And so like with Blue Violet, Jeanette had encouraged me to do these drawings, these infographics. And so I did the same with Emerald, where I decided to take color swatches, different ways of color swatches. So it could be, this obviously is a pie chart, but there are color swatch glossaries. There's 7 or 8 different drawings throughout the book. Another where my mum was in ICU, and I didn't have a camera with me, and probably wouldn't have taken it out at that moment because it was just depressing and awful and sad. But afterwards, I made a watercolor. And then I took the Werner's nomenclature of color and added my own line, which is the 5th column, woman, to the information. So, and then an erasure. So now Jeanette is really pushing me to sort of, what are the other ways that you can show these ideas? So it's, again, bringing in that element of surprise. And then this is the glossary at the end, where I take sort of things that I've written about throughout the course of the book and bring it together at the end. I'm trying to have fun. I'm trying to surprise people and show information in a way that is perhaps unexpected. So at this point, I'm going to stop my share, and Jeanette is going to go. And how are we doing for time? Great. That was 20 minutes. Perfect.
Oh, wonderful. There were some questions. I don't know if you want to take them on now.
I think you start, Jeanette, and I'll jump in and
Okay, let me do that. Thank you. Let's go here. Play. Let me see where you stopped.
I stopped on slide 20, Jeanette. So you're on 21.
Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, it's been a privilege to work with Cig. As you can see, she doesn't give me a lot of information to work off to translate. Joke, that was a joke, haha. So she's an awesome collaborator because she's so open to ideas, and what makes her so spectacular is how she does find that thread. How she was talking about how she was looking at her life and saw how color tied it together. I just think is really magical. And yeah, so I'm just happy to be here. Okay, so one of the first questions I always ask, what kind of book are we making? And I would imagine you are also thinking that. And Cig talked about that earlier. There's all kinds of bookmaking. One isn't better than the other. They all have their pluses and minuses. So when we started working on Blue Violet and Emerald Drifters, it wasn't about just documenting a body of work. We were building a felt experience. And for me, that is really a challenge because it's not a monograph. It's not a historical book where I organized information chronologically. And so it makes it more challenging to to design a book that's more about an experience, and also rewarding. So, for me, my design choices have to be intentional but quiet because I want the work, the illustrations, the photography, the writing to be at the forefront. So my typography needs to listen, it needs to scale and breathe. And it needs in a sequence that doesn't explain but evokes. So this isn't about putting things in chronological. We don't start out saying, oh, she photographed this on this date and we're going to end on this date. So it's not that type of book. So we're not aiming to categorize, we're aiming to immerse the reader into the experience. It's a book you feel your way through. It's a layered experience of a life lived. And Emerald Drifters is through the lens of color, which is an exciting metaphor for a designer. So I knew that color needed to be present in the design elements. Okay, so now mine's not going. There we go. So this is an outline of our process that Cig went into. I just wanted to throw this back up. It's, I teach, so, I could get really long-winded, but I'll try to keep it short. One can do, a whole class, a whole semester breaking each of these components up. But I won't do that here, but I do think it's a great outline that you really need to have idea and a concept, and someone needs to spend hours, years to develop it. And then when they come to a designer, it makes it much more easier because the designer has a point of view to translate. So Cig does her work incredibly well. The first three top parts are when she is doing all of that journaling, figuring out what she wants, and understanding what that thread is. And then she throws it over to me, and I'm the design exploration and prototyping. Then we do layout refinement. We do pre-press, production prep, proofing and final checks, printing and delivery, marketing and launch. So there's a lot that goes into making a book, as you can see. So I had, I could draw off of the foundation of Blue Violet. And we knew that this was going to be a sequel, so we wanted to carry over a lot of the design elements, like the trim size, the typography, both in scale, and the typeface, the fabric cover material, the use of full bleed images to ensure that the books were a set. So lucky me, Cig was on board with that idea. The publisher was on board with that idea. So we were able to, drill down and do other design explorations. So this is Blue Violet. It says a design recap. I'll share this with you. So you can see we have full bleed images. We have full bleed color washes. We have typographic scale. We have poetry. We decided to keep Song Blue. We felt like it was an elegance with an edge. It really reflects Cig's visual and literary voice. And also the typeface supports long reading and poetic forms. And it's just, it's a perfect typeface for Cig, or so I think. And so here is Song Blue Republic and Song Blue Empire. The Empire is more the display text, and Republic was more the workhorse. It's an editorial, it comes from an editorial background. It's used in editorial, but it yet feels contemporary. It's a perfect typographic echo of Cig's storytelling, photographic craft, and literary voice. Song Blue Empire, the bottom one, is a refined serif structure with high contrast. It has dramatic sculptural forms, and for me, it mirrors Cig's visual style. It's lush, it's poetic, and it's charged with emotion and mystery. When I typed Cig's name for the first time in this typeface, I went bonkers. I just love the form. I love the ears on the G. I love the serifs. I love the A, how it looks so watery and full of emotion. But it's also modern and sharp, and it has a, dramatic sculptural forms. And I just felt like it was the perfect typeface for her kind of emotionally charged life, stories, and mystery. So it took me, it looks easy here because I'm just, condensing this into a conversation, but it took me, weeks of study to get to this right typeface. When I showed it to Cig, she fell in love with it. Even though we had other options on the table, and I've always been very just think it's the perfect typeface for her. So here is, I'm going to play this video for a minute. This is Cig walking through her studio, looking at all of the press proofs that come back from the printer, and you can kind of see the the full bleed images, how the typography looks like structure. To me, it's like musical notes as she goes through. You can just see, all of the typographic scales, letting scale shifts and white space and rhythms, allowing the sequence to kind of unfold more like a conversation rather than a chronology.
I wanted to just add there, Jeanette, I threw that one in just because, everything in the image, there's been some questions on sequencing. It's all well and good to live on Bridge, but then it has to be printed out. I you know, it has to be printed out. And I know you do that, Jeanette, too, right? If hard copies, the way it moves through, it's so different on the screen than it is when you're holding the pages in person. I think it's essential, don't you, Jeanette, to do that?
Absolutely. Because the more you prototype and you put it into the form of a book, you have to think of the book as a product. It's a product that, or a piece of industrial design that it's been used for centuries and people know how to use it. So when you're designing and working in a book, print it out, make it feel like a book, and start experiencing it, and it will tell you something. It will give you some knowledge back. When you live on the computer, it's kind of seductive in a way, and also it can also be a blocker because at one point you don't know what to do. It just looks like a bunch of images. And once you print it out and it becomes physical, it becomes easier for you to like look at, observe, fix, prototype. It's a constant circle. So here you can see once Cig gives me her PDF, I kind of put the book into a book map so that we can move stuff around, and you can, to me, like this is equivalent to like sheet music for a musician. You can see it, bird's eye view, you can start seeing rhythm. Also this book doesn't have traditional chapter breaks. So we use the color tinted pages to help with those to help differentiate like a movement into a different kind of story. So it's more like a conversation. It kind of meanders. But these here you can kind of see the shifts of the color paper. You can see like 44th through 49. There's like an immersive image bank. Then it pulls out to like white space, single images, color. So we're like able to look at it and kind of move it around. And we go through, even though this is version 1, I'm not sure why that is, we can go through like 16 of these maps until we get the flow exactly the way we want it. So as we move into the middle of the book, you can see that it gets denser with photography. The typography is there, it's readable, it's pleasurable. I'm not changing the text sizes, I'm not moving it around. The column structures is the same. It's almost like a drum beat or like a heartbeat behind, letting the photographs expand, but also invite the reader in to read the copy. So as you can see, and then as we sequence out, we have, you see less of the photography, and it like sequence out to the end of the book. With the essay from Ocean Vuong, which was unbelievable. It made me weep when I read it. I was texting Cig when I read it. I was like, I can't believe he nailed your work. I mean, it was unbelievable. So if you have the book, you should read that essay because it's fabulous. And, we had like on page 157, you can see like a big type moment. This sort of sections the end of the book. And then on page 209, we also have a big type moment to kind of end the book. So we have all these subtle signals through typography, photography placement to like use to create the book without having like these traditional, like, here's the title page, this is that body of work. It's more of an organic conversation. So one of the big movements that we had was the typography movement. Sorry, I just looked at my clock and I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to push through this. So the ombre typography how could I get the type to do something on the page that didn't overwhelm the content? Cig had seen some early sketches that I did an ombre type study, and she really loved it, but we weren't sure if it was going to work because of technical issues. And some of the people on our team were like not sure either. So what we did was we decided to do a wet proof to test the color blends and see if the type sizes worked. And once we did that, so here you can see the test proof back. We did a wet proof. The publisher had that in the budget. We tested all kinds of ombre type. And we also tested a copper color. And at the end, we felt everyone was really drawn to the ombre. And we picked one of the colors that were more subtle, a little more monochromatic. And we felt it was easier on the eye, but it just gave like a little ripple effect. And, we went into the greens because it reminds us of the lush landscapes, richness, depth, suggesting of the title of drifting, fluidity. So it seemed like the right move. Here you can see it on Cig's essay at the beginning, her manifesto. So it just allows for this, like, it doesn't overtake you, but it has enough detail to make it feel special. And it was crazy once we did the proof, everyone loved it. There was so much apprehension at the beginning, but my philosophy is unless you see the proof, there's nothing for us to talk about. So it was awesome to get the proof so we could all cross that off and just keep moving. Here is how one of the stories would work with the photography. And you can see that I decided to make all the typography the same scale, the heads and the body copy, because I felt like once I introduced a scale change for the heading last night, I slept in the goldenrod, it just felt overwhelming. And so I had to like dial that down to let the content happen, and also enjoying the ombre, the type. So here you can see what an essay looks like. Not an essay, a story that it doesn't have any artwork, her illustrations. And you can see that it's, it begins to work across the board, big type moments. So it could scale, it was cohesive. So we were like using Song Blue differently than we did in Blue Violet, but they're also feeling, like a sibling. I love these parts. Cig had some how to make a cake, how to use how to take a photograph, how to make a print. And I made these layouts feel like a little bit informational, but also kind of playful, moving it about to just create rhythm and be a little more playful. Because if you read the copy is very playful, but informational at the same time. So here you can see the overview of how all of the ombre type worked. And I loved it working this out with Cig. She was in love with it. So I felt committed to like working it out. So I think that was a really positive moment. So the other big move was we incorporated these color washes throughout the book to help reinforce the core theme of color and to signal transition in content. A range of hues was carefully chosen to evoke a feeling of drifting, in line with the book's title and mood. So here you can see, we took the photograph and we like it's almost like you wrung it out and it produced this like pink color. And we went through many iterations of what these colors should be. So this was, one of them. Then we went for these deep, lush, rich, moody jewel tones. But again, it feels like it belongs with the photograph. Another one. And the emerald green coming. So all of them are different. They're all bespoke. So that was the system, that it was always drifting, but there was a philosophy behind the choosing of the color, because it was just like you were wringing it out. How could you produce a color from a photograph? It's not that I dropped the photograph, it was more of a feeling of the photograph. And we used pinks as the only, as a surprise, as the only color that became brighter, more saturated. It was, and we felt like it offered like a fresh surprise and added energy to the editorial flow. So here you can kind of see the tinted color pages, and you can see how the pinks were used. And the system was that they couldn't be the same, which was fun, which is more conversational, more organic, more like life, but so that is it. So now I'm going to talk about the cover exploration. A lot of books that I work on, the covers they come together really, really fast, and everyone like gravitates towards a cover. So, but in Emerald Drifters, it didn't happen that way. So we went through many cover explorations, and I'm going to play the cover, all my studies that I did. And even though it's a 2-minute slide, presentation, it did not take me 2 minutes. It took me, months and months, not months, but weeks and weeks of work. And we just kept on working it until we got the cover. And, it was quite kind of a process.
Yeah, I think, with, it seems in every book, and Jeanette's done so many books for Aperture, and she's worked on a lot of photography books. It feels like with every book, there's always something, right, Jeanette? And with Violet, we were down to the wire with the color of the font, do you remember the type on the cover? And it was almost like we went blind, just it was a wing and a prayer, but when it came to Emerald, everything else had gone so smoothly, but the cover was really complicated. Like the heads at Fiden didn't agree with Jeanette and I. Jeanette, I always feel like Jeanette is the best in the business, so whatever she says goes. But when it came to the cover, you and I even had this moment where we weren't sure which one to go, and it was really a sweat fest right up. I was in Iceland trying to take a call. Do you remember, Jeanette? Oh my goodness. So there are, I love where we landed, but there were so many good options, and it was a tough call. And so there's a question about why were the pages in Blue Violet not cut? So it's a French fold. So it's out. So that was because of the senses, but it became that they were this set. So we had this cloth cover for Blue Violet, and we wanted to keep a cloth cover for Emerald Drifters, but our favorite cover, which was this one with the eye, it didn't work on cloth. And it was like, no, remember the cloth? It didn't work. This was the cover that we were last minute, the one you're looking at right now, the last slide you're on, that right up until the end, that was the cover. And I still love it. If it was printed on paper, that would have been a great cover. But it just didn't work on cloth. So then we were like, do we have a paper cover for Emerald and a cloth cover for the Blue Violet? It was a real indecision on, my part. It was not an easy decision, right, Jeanette?
No, but I think we landed, I feel like they're a nice set with blue violet. And so here's the final one. And everyone was happy at the end. But it was, and I have to give it to Cig for being able to like, there's a lot of pressure to go to press with the publishers, and it's a lot, it's hard work. And so when you know when something isn't right in your gut and you need to speak up, there's always time to fix it. And we also had looked at this as a cover option, so it wasn't terrible to go back. So I feel like, you got to keep it open. It is a proof, right? And a proof is a proof. It's not the final one. So you should be able to like, hey, that proof, I don't like it, I don't dig it for whatever reasons, and you should be able to kind of refine it.
Yeah, I think that whole thing, what you just said about sort of knowing in your gut, it comes back to the instinct of what is your, and speaking to you and the audience here, like, what is your book about and where are the parameters? And then just, knowing, staying true to it. With the proofing process, when I first got the first round of proofs for Emerald, they were flat and completely unsaturated. And it took 5 rounds of proofing. And I really felt that 5th round, I was being a squeaky wheel. And I was like, can I just let it go? But at the end of the day, it's your name on the book. And so you have to trust your instinct with it. And some photographers just give a box, they give their prints to the designer and the publisher, and they do the whole thing and they get a book back. I think it's really important that you keep your, you won't do many books in your life, unless you're Barbara Cartland. We don't get to do many books in our lifetime. And so, you have to love it. So if no one else buys it, that you've got the book, the best that you could do. And so to be involved in that process of sequencing and editing and the story flow, I think is really important. A couple of people are asking questions, Jeanette, like the book titles. So they all come out of the writing, and the writing is very much a part of the journaling, but then it's rewritten. All the essays and vignettes in both of these books, they feel journalistic, but they've been rewritten probably 100 times. Writing is all about the rewriting. Jeanette, there's a couple of questions for you here about what's the software you do the book maps in?
I mean, there's book maps out there for you to use. I make mine all in InDesign because I'm very into details. So the book maps that you get off, for software, you're not able to change the proportion. So when you load your files in, it looks janky, it's not fitting perfectly. So I always make mine in InDesign. It's a tedious process, but it's the only way I can see if the design is coming together. I truly recommend it. I talk to my students all the time. We work, I really want them to work in book maps. To me, it's a way for them to like look at the work from an overview. So you should just find what works for you. But I'm glad that you picked up on that, because it is a true friend, the book map. I don't know, when people say they don't use them, I'm like, oh man, I just don't know how I don't know how you could do it.
Some people asking like, why do I work in a sequence and sequels? I don't know, just if that feels really intuitive to me, of just that I mean, in many ways, all my books could be a continuation. But for me, I just love the idea of triptychs and always have done. Let's read some of the questions. Yeah. Someone's asking about some of the books on color. I can put them out, give them to Beth if you want. And Beth, could you send out like if anyone wanted it, a little bibliography from this talk of my favorite books on color. Some of them are really intense. Some of them are more fun. Just the history of color, of where we get our paint and pigment and gems from, and human relations, connection to color since the beginning of time. Yeah. Michael, do you want to jump in at all with any of the questions or?
Yeah, I see. There was a question very early on about asking if you could expand on your editing process a little bit, like the selection of images.
Yeah, typically I go through I work in digital, I go through and I mark them on Bridge, and then I come back the next day and I mark them on Bridge and refine, start printing, get it down to one or two. Typically I'm looking for the one from each shoot. But sometimes there's two, and so I live with them, print them, put them in the visual source books. That helps sort of separate what's saying what. And then, slowly start building. And so once I get them off the computer, they're on the floor in the studio, on the wall behind me. And then I start seeing the relationships to each other visually, color. People ask if, how do I sequence with color? I mean, color and form is definitely sort of leading you on this journey, but I don't want, as I mentioned, it wasn't, we could have sequenced the book through the spectrum of the rainbow, but we wanted to make it more of a surprise and switch it up from that. So it was sort of leading you in and out of this color journey.
And at the end of that question, she asked, "How do you kill your darlings?" I've always found that, like, especially in curatorial projects when we're working on exhibitions, there are always images you really need to include, but you just can't. They just
Yeah.
don't quite fit. And I'm sure you've had to, with all of the images you've taken and really love, how do you handle that release?
Well, I think sometimes that they'll come back. You have to sort of have that rigor with the book, and that's why a second pair of eyes, and then a designer working with a designer, Jeanette, who's only looking at it for, to that it could be the best that it could be, and that it's nothing is repetitious, nothing's missing. That you need that designer, I think, coming, looking at both the form and the content. So, that you just have to do it. And by the end of the process that goes on, I mean, just looking at those color pages, the ones that went opposite the photographs, I mean, that we went back and forth maybe 50 times on those different colors. So that's what I love about books, but it was also so like enormous and frustrating is there's so many different options. And it almost gets to the point where you just have to make a decision and realize that photography is a reproducible medium, and maybe that other image that you loved will have its life in another book on another day.
Yeah, yeah. One of the other questions is related a little bit more directly to your writing and journaling. Can you talk a little bit about that and that process in relation to images and how that probably feeds titles and sequencing and editing and all of those things when they
Yeah,
come
so
together?
I try and write when I'm in the sort of inward, making period. I try and write every day, and I'm writing about what I noticed, what stopped me in my tracks, what surprised me, and then maybe there's a line I write that I'm like, oh, it's almost like an electric jolt that goes through me, and I'm like, that's something. And then the next day or the later that afternoon, I'll take that sentence and write to that. So it's sort of based on, morning pages for, 20 minutes, just getting out the junk. And then in the junk, perhaps there's this little like gem that then I want to write about. So that's typically, and then it's rewriting, putting it together in vignette, line all the book out, the pictures and the text out on the floor, and the puzzle of where it all goes. And that puzzle can take months.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the part I've worked, working with some of my MFA students at Main Media, that they don't, I think until you've done it, you don't realize just how excruciatingly long and painful finding all the pieces of the puzzle where it goes can be. But I love that process and I wouldn't give it away for a minute. But it's not, it's a process. It's a sweaty process.
So after all of that work, and you give it to Jeanette, Jeanette's looking through the images and the words together. Can you talk a little bit, Jeanette, about the how you receive that and lay it out on the page when you're looking at an image and words together? Do they sort of inform one another in that sense, or you just take what you're given from Cig as the artist as gospel, or do you have a back and forth with her about maybe questioning some of those decisions and how they come together?
Yeah, that's a good question. Cig does a lot of work up front, so it makes my job, easier, but also I need to be more on my toes. So I'm there to help her like to make this work as an experience in a book. So because she has done all this, I get her PDF, I lay everything out, I have ideas of how the typography should be structured and organized. You know, I could lean into blue violet on that. So once we get you know, the book put into the book format and we make PDFs, then we can kind of refine it. You know, we'll be like, oh, we need to have more images here because it will make you know, have more of an immersion. So, you know, we want to have an ebb and flow throughout the content. So I can put my like visual editor's hat on. You know, how do the illustrations lay on the page? Should they have tone behind them? Should they feel like they're printed on the paper? You know, all these little details we would go back and forth. You know, then, you know, what we didn't have the color tints on the we didn't have the color tints originally in there. They were just white sheets, but we kind of needed them. We needed them to kind of put their arms around the next section of the content. We love this idea of like squeezing out, wrenching out a color, one color from that photograph. And we also, the other system was that it had to be different. It had to be drifting, but then it also needed to feel contained. So, you know, that is kind of my involvement. I kind of translate. I spend a lot of time with the artist, the photographer, and then I kind of get a feeling for them, and then you know, it's just my instincts. I start translating it, and I try to not get in the way of the work, but appreciate the work. And for the person who was like, how do you edit out something that you love? You kind of have to put the bird's eye view on. You only have so many pages. I don't know, I can't remember the final page count on this book, but if it's 204 pages, that's all you have. So you need to like figure it out. You're like a film director. You need to use that flow and just like pop it out, you know, like you can't keep something you love in for the sake of just loving it, because if you do, then you're in for a slippery slope, right? You got to have your goals, your aims, what you're trying to do, and that image that you pull out may be your favorite. So print it out, frame it, and put it on your wall.
Exactly.
You know, you just have to, or like Cig said, it shows up somewhere else. I don't know if that answers the question, but you know,
absolutely.
a lot of times the designer is translating, and it's not, you know, I don't have like a designer button that I like, oh, Cig Harvey, click, and it all happens. It's like, it's a lot of work. Like how do you, what kind of voice does this book deserve, you know, and you know, listening to Cig and understanding that she loves conversation and she loves ambiguity, but she's focused because of the color theme throughout. Then it's easy. Oh, make the type have an ombre. Make some of these pages have color. So it reinforces like this idea, but you know, we're designers are translators. And the good ones are able to get out of the way of their own, like, you know, like what they think it should be. And like, if you go deep into like translating, you know, something comes out more magical. I would never have done an ombre type in a art book, but you know, here I am with it. You know, I think it more of a magazine kind of like stylistic form.
Jeanette, will you stop sharing? Someone wants to see you bigger.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
just as in the back of the book, sorry, I knew I'd done this somewhere. I was like, I've written the color book. In the back of the book, there's a resources, and it's hand painted by me, and it's all the color books. So if you have a copy of Emerald Drifters, this is all the color books that I used as not all of them, but the main ones that I used for information and background for the book.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, then if we can get one more question, I think that the really easy question in a short response might be, what single piece of advice might you give someone who's working on a book for the first time? How would you direct them to get going?
Well, I would definitely say, books around one idea, photo books around one idea, and that idea could be the journey of a river or something. It doesn't have to be a small idea. It could be an enormous idea, but, migration, it could be, one idea rather than a greatest hits is always a stronger book, in my opinion. So I think, first of all, the work has to be there, the book has to be there. And then it's, find whether you trade, find a designer to work with, but taking that one idea for your work and, really fleshing it out, thinking about, well, who's the best writer? I mean, working with Ocean was such a dream. And, that was just setting a goal. And if in the brainstorming, in all the world, if anyone could write the essay for this book, who would it be? And I think it was Jeanette who said that. I was like, well, it would be Ocean. And she was like, well, ask him. And I was like, oh, I can't ask him. And he said yes. So that idea of just, thinking about, who is the audience for this book? What is the content? What are the parameters around this book? So it's not just, this is my photography work. It's like, this is the story of my grandmother. And then all the considerations of the design of the book around that, like, should the cover of the book be paper thin? Should it be, all these things that, like, the form mirroring the content, and working with a designer with that. Jeanette, what would you say?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. That things very simple. Yeah, it's really about the concept and the idea, and having the inspiration and staying true to the inspiration, and not sometimes you have the inspiration and then it splinters off into 5 things. That is a sign to, like, get back to the inspiration. It can't be 5 things. It needs to be 1 thing. This is a book about color, color, but you're able to have cakes, and you're able to have life stories about dying and living and celebration, nature.
Right.
There's so much there to take in, but the concept of color holds it.
Yeah, and it was flowers with blue violet. So, having it something, because then you can go deep, right? You don't dig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Very good. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Cig. Thank you, Jeanette. This was really a wonderful tour through that process, and I know we're all grateful and inspired, and I hope we will see a lot of you on campus, and come join us this summer and work on that book. We'll help you.
Yeah, someone was asking about it's Madeline Morley's class in September. I saw that question, and it's all about turning your work into a book, and she's finding she's really good. So there's so many. And Richard Wright Smith has got so many great book classes up on the docket this summer. So yeah, hopefully see you there in the studio. Maybe we can get Jeanette there. What do you think?
I would love it.
I think so. I think you can work on that. We need some more Texas on campus up here, and
get me out of this heat. Get me out of the heat.
Very good.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Main Media. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Bethy.
Thank you so
much.
All
our best. Stay tuned. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.